afternoon to all of you out there. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and welcome to our first virtual LCDBG grantee workshop. I just ask that you bear with us. This, again, is our first time doing this, so there may be some hiccups, but hopefully we've got most of them ironed out, and we won't have any issues. I'll say on a personal note, I think I've always felt like I was a pretty technologically savvy person, or at least I could get along. But this situation that we've been in has certainly taught me how much I did not know. And I have learned a lot. So we look forward to going over this stuff with you today. I'm Tracy Watts. I'm the director of the program. You can see on your screen, or you should see a listing of some of our staff members and what their position is. And you're also going to be, Heather, if you go to the next screen, you'll see the rest of the staff, and you'll see the assignments that have been given to the staff on the grants. So if your name is listed below one of their staff persons, that's who's going to be your representative in our office for your project. Today we're going to be going over everything from a very high level. The presentation you'll see as we go through is much more detailed, but in the interest of time, we didn't feel like we needed to keep you on the computer for 3 hours. We would prefer to hit some high level points with you and provide this presentation to you for referral afterwards. We'll not be using the raise your hand function of the program. If you move your mouse, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, it'll pop up with a Q&A icon. You can use that to ask questions throughout the webinar. Someone is going to be monitoring that function and trying to respond to your questions throughout. If we can't get to your question throughout the webinar, we will be sharing that information later with everyone. So you should be able to get an answer to your question eventually. Let's see. We do have a couple of poll questions that we're going to be sharing with you. That we're going to go ahead and do the first one now. It'll just give you an option to answer your question here. It's how long have you been the mayor or parish president? And it gives you some ranges: less than 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, and 6+ years. So we just ask that you answer that question, and we're going to move on from there. And again, we'll probably have 2 more, or 1 or 2 more throughout the webinar as we move forward that you'll see pop up. And we ask that you respond to give us some background. And remember that we're always here to help. We may not be out in your community right now, but we are working every day. We're available by phone, email, obviously by Zoom meeting as well if we need to. We've gotten really good at conducting conference calls. So you can talk to us if you have any questions or if you need any assistance. Also, we have a Facebook page. Many of you probably are already aware, but it is Louisiana Office of Community Development - Local Government Assistance. And I would encourage you all to follow or like that page, because that is how we're getting information out quickly to interested parties. So you'll get a notification when we do share things on that page. We share things like funding opportunities. We share who got funded under the different programs. We share if we have any deadlines. And sometimes we're highlighting projects that we have funded, and we want to share with everyone and give them some ideas about what they might could do. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the next person, and that's going to be Rusty Reeves, who is with the LRWA, the Louisiana Rural Water Association, and he's going to talk to you about the requirements for your sewer and water grants, that you have to complete a rate study. So Rusty, you're up.
Rusty, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate it. And congratulations to all the grant recipients. Hope that these funds will help you care of situations in your community. I'm going to talk to you briefly about the rate studies. We conduct them for the CDBG recipients. There's no charge to the recipients. And this also helps you calculate as to whether your current rates are adequate enough to support the infrastructure that is fixing to be improved in your water or your wastewater system. The rate study is a fairly easy process. The biggest thing is getting the correct information that when we ask for it. If we can get it in a timely manner, everything goes pretty smooth. There may be repeat visits to your system to get the information, if it has to be separated out. If you have a water project, we're going to be doing a rate study on your water revenue and your water expenses. If you have a wastewater project, we'll be doing a rate study on your wastewater revenue and your wastewater expenses. So we ask that you have that split out for us so that we can effectively to support the infrastructure that you have and that you're going to improve. We will have a staff member assigned to each community, and I have the contact person name for the grant, and I have a phone number that I'm going to share with our staff after lunch today, and they will be contacting you in the next few days to go ahead and get the rate study process started. Because of my understanding, and Ms. Tracy may have to help me with this, we need to have these completed for you by October, correct?
Yeah, I would say they need to pay attention to their application revision letter that gives them their deadline, because not all of these grants were awarded at one time, which is our typical process. So there may be slight differences in that deadline. So they need to pay attention to that. And the grant reps will also be sending them out reminders as well.
Okay. And our biggest thing is the quicker we can get the information, the quicker we can get finished and get it turned back into CDBG, and the quicker they can evaluate your information and move on with the grant process. And we want this to be as efficient as possible. So that's all I have, Ms. Tracy.
Thank you, Rusty. We are going to move on to Jimmy Martin. Let me see. Y'all be patient. All right, Jimmy, unmute yourself.
Okay. My name is Jimmy Martin. I'm going to talk about grant agreement conditions. In your package, you're going to receive an authorization to incur cost letter. These will be obviously sent to you by mail this time. The authorization to incur costs authorizes the planning and administration costs. It permits environmental review record to begin, permits plans and specs to be prepared, describes penalties for not meeting the deadlines. And if there's going to be a problem meeting a deadline, please contact your rep as soon as possible. Don't wait until the last day or afterwards to request an extension. And by all means, this is not authorize you to advertise for bids or begin construction at this time. So do not do that. You're going to receive a blank grant agreement. Instructions are below in the cover letter. Sign the grant agreement and return it within 30 days, but please do not date the grant agreement. You're also going to receive an authorized signature form. 2 people need to be authorized to sign requests for payments. The certifying officer signs and dates the form. Make sure the typed signatures are exactly the same as the written signatures. So if you sign your name with an initial, make sure your name is typed with the initial, and vice versa. I like to always tell people to sign it as if you were signing a check. If for some reason the certifying officer is not going to be the chief elected official, you need to also send a resolution certifying whoever that person is that will certify the signatures down at the bottom. And one more thing, the certifying officer cannot certify their own signature. So you can't be a certifying officer and sign the request for payments. Electronic funds transfer. This is different than it was in the past. This year, you need to contact the Office of Statewide Reporting and Accounting Policy, also known as OSRAP, and this is _ DOA-OSRAP-EFT@la.gov or at the phone number 225-342-1097 to get the enrollment form. If you have an old form, one that you used on your last grant, you can't use that anymore. You need to contact OSRAP. You'll also be required to send an aborted check. Along with the EFT form, the OSRAP, you will send in a request for vendor information form that will come back to me. And you will also send in a W-9 that comes back to me. Okay. Where are the forms? As you can see, this the screenshot shows it's on the grant management section of our website. However, you notice that it only says 2019 Grantee Handbook because the 20 Handbook has not been loaded yet onto this page. It will be shortly. The 2020 Handbook is actually on the About LCDBG right now. Also, next slide. When you do click on, when it is moved there, you will see, you click on the 2020 Grantee Handbook, it'll come up and then you can see some fillable forms underneath and you'll see that the vendor information form is listed there. The W-9 is listed there. Those are PDFs that you can fill out, type in, print out, and then forward to me. You will also be receiving an application revision letter shortly from your grant rep. The 5-month deadline is October 27th of 2020. Some things that you'll be asked to send to us: a financial management questionnaire, surety bonds, environmental review record. You must receive authority from us to publish the ERR by October 27th. So we strongly recommend that you get those in a month ahead of time. That allows us to review it, request revisions, you send it back, we review those, and give you time to publish. So we want to make sure that you get permission to publish by October 27th. A community development plan, a fair housing assurance, a section 504 assurance, a residential anti-displacement relocation plan and certification, revisions to the application, plans and specs, and the final cost estimate just need to be in this office by the deadline. Firm commitments for other project funds if applicable, the rate study, and any other documentation that we may request. You'll also have a paragraph in that letter that deals with risk analysis. You'll be rated as either high risk, medium risk, or low risk. That will depend on many factors, but a few factors that would set that rating. How long has it been since you've had a grant with us? What was the performance of that last grant? If you had a lot of issues in the last grant, your risk might be greater. So pay attention to that. If you're high risk, there's a mandatory technical assistance visit. We'll come out, look, see how you're doing, and then so we can help you fix some issues before we do the formal monitoring. If you're medium, you can request that technical assistance, or you can just do normal technical assistance. And once again, with these meetings and coming out and all of that, obviously with COVID, we don't know what's going to happen, but we'll have to play that by ear. And then if you are low risk, technical assistance will be given as normal over the phone, email, etc. And if you need to contact me, once again, my name is Jimmy Martin, and the phone number is 225-342-7412, or my direct number is 342-7421. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Next up, we are going to have financial management with Janelle. Janelle, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. like Tracy said, there's a lot of information here. I'm going to try to hit the highlights for financial management. So first of all, I want to tell you to please read the financial management section of the grantee handbook, because it will give you all of the details that you need. And of course, you can also always ask questions if you have them. Okay, so for monitoring and for document maintenance, you are going to need to keep all of your financial statements, all of your bank statements for LCDBG activity. You can go to the next slide. You're also going to want to maintain all of your source documentation, including invoices. You need to keep updated bonding insurance for all of your employees signing checks. We do request that LCDBG funds be recorded in a separate capital projects fund or a separate special revenue fund. If that isn't possible for the way that you're set up, we do ask that you have a supplemental schedule that includes an income statement and balance sheet for LCDBG funds. Okay, so I think bank account information is next. You do need to maintain a separate account for LCDBG funds. The account needs to be used for both deposits and disbursements of funds. It needs to be non-interest bearing. Checks need to be pre-numbered unless you're using electronic printouts of checks, which is okay as well. 2 signatures are required on all checks, and you cannot pre-sign the check. You can go to the next slide. If you do need to use a clearing account, you must request written permission to do that, and permission needs to be requested for this specific project. In the future, if you have another project, it will have to be requested as well. So if you've received permission for past projects, you still need to request it for this project. If you do use a clearing account because you have written permission to do so, you need to prepay all invoices, and your checks need to clear prior to requesting reimbursement from us. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, for your audits, okay, so financial management questionnaire. This is something that you'll have to fill out for all of the people who are performing various financial duties. Make sure there's at least 2 people to sign RFPs, make sure there's at least 2 people to sign checks. And you should have someone on your staff that has generally accepted accounting principles, or someone that you can contract with to prepare your fiscal year and financial statements. You do need to make sure that you maintain surety bond or other insurance on everyone who's signing checks for LCDBG payments. If you have any personnel changes, make sure that we get updated policies for them, and make sure that you also submit a new financial management questionnaire for any personnel changes as well. Okay, for audit requirements, it's going to be based on the amount of expenditures of federal funds that you have in any given year. As a grantee, you are responsible for procuring for an audit. You need to make sure that you provide your auditor with everything that they need. You can go to the next slide. Make sure that you provide your auditor with all the documentation that they need timely, so that they are able to prepare the audit and submit it to the legislative auditor. If you do end up on the non-compliance list because of a late audit, we can't issue any payments for your grant. And again, your funding should be, your LCDBG fund should be listed separately in your fiscal year and audit. Okay, so for requests for payments, there's a form on our website that you will fill out. The signatures need to match the authorized signature form exactly. And again, if there's a personnel change, you need to submit a new authorized signature form and financial management questionnaire. The signatures on the form should be original. You can go ahead and, this is a copy of the form. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the signature should be original. All of your approved invoices should be attached, and you mail it to the Office of Community Development. Your invoices need to identify the goods and services that were received or performed. You need to break down the tasks that were completed for any professional services, and you also need to have both beginning and ending dates on all of your invoices. If other money is paying for a portion of the invoice, that should be shown separately on the invoice. Okay, you can monitor payments through the Division of Administration's OSRAP website. And if you want to just flip through these are just what the pages look like. You just need to use your tax ID number to get into it. And if you have questions about this, you can ask us, or your consultant can help you with it as well. You do need to monitor payments closely so that your contractors are paid timely. If we process your RFP by Thursday afternoon, you can expect payment the following Friday, and your vendors must be paid within 3 business days of the deposit. Program income is something that you should not be receiving. If for any reason you do receive it, please notify us immediately. And this is just a list of recent findings or concerns. It's a good reference for you to review to avoid any findings whenever we come out to monitor your grant. And again, if you have any questions, you can contact me at area code 225-342-7412 or janelle.dickey@la.gov.
Thank you, Janelle. Next up, we have Amanda with environmental review, or sorry, community development plan.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, you're a little bit low, so talk loud.
Okay. A community development plan describes a community's needs and how those needs are being addressed. These needs include neighborhood revitalization, community-wide housing, public facilities, and economic development. And this is just an example of what the CD plan form looks like so you can visualize it and understand what I'm about to go over. Next slide, please. All grantees must submit a CD plan to our office. I review them and sometimes ask for revisions. The period of applicability can be found at the top of the CD plan. It must cover the 3-year period of the grant. A letter is sent authorizing the grantee to incur costs for planning and administration, which includes preparing all necessary items to clear contract conditions. This date should be used as the start of the period. I think you have to press it again. There should be more text. You can just, yeah. Okay, the CD plan must describe the community's needs and how it plans to address or is currently addressing those needs. All needs must be addressed, including needs that are not covered by LCDBG funds. In Section 2 of the CD plan, describe all the needs. In Section 4, address all the needs from Section 2. Be sure to mention objectives, activities, timing, monetary amounts, and funding sources in Section 4. Sometimes the CD plans I receive have a general strategy section added, but you do not need one. Next slide, please. In Section 2D, be sure to mention which groups have a high unemployment rate. If there are none, state that there are no identifiable population groups. Once you have completed the CD plan, make sure that you review the instructions and that they match what you have written. Remember to describe all the needs, address them, and include all items mentioned in the instructions. And that's it.
Thank you, Amanda. Let's see. Next up is Jimmy again, but going over civil rights. Jimmy, you can unmute.
Are you gonna put up the poll question? Hi, we have a quick poll question, and when we get through my presentation, you'll be able to answer this. But the question is, can you commit a fair housing violation by favoring a minority? Yes or no? All right, civil rights. All grantees are required to complete and adopt a language access plan within 1 year of the authorization to incur cost letter. This must be reviewed and updated annually. Next slide. Okay, this is new, the text in red. Up until recently, you got your data to do the language access plan from American Fact Finder. American Fact Finder, the website has gone dark. You can no longer access it. So now you need to find it through census.gov. Census.gov is really sketchy. They haven't loaded up everything yet. However, if you just do a web search for census.gov S-1601 language spoken at home, it will pull up the table to give you the data. Also, the handbook will be updated to reflect this change as well. Next slide. If somebody comes in off the street and you don't know how to talk to them, you can use Google Translate or you can use the I Speak cards. Also, we have a copy of our language access plan in the Exhibits A section of the handbook. Section 504, basically no qualified individual with handicaps can be excluded or participated in or denied the benefits of or otherwise be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity solely on the basis of their handicap. All right, minimum 504 requirements. You need to complete a 504 assurance and send that into OCD. That's in the Exhibits A section. You need to do a self-evaluation. You need to maintain data showing individuals that are beneficiaries of a program. Also, you have to have a functioning TDD or Louisiana relay system. The numbers are in Section A. That number must be advertised in the paper within 6 months of the authorization to incur cost letter. If you are a grantee with 15 or more employees, designate a 504 coordinator, prepare and adopt a grievance procedure, place a notice in the town hall, parish courthouse, or publish in the newspaper that the grantee does not discriminate on the basis of a handicap, and that should be published or posted within 90 days of receipt of the executed grant agreement. Check Section A for the current language. The notice should also identify the 504 coordinator as well. Self-evaluation. Evaluate your current policies in the areas of physical accessibility, communications, and employment. Buildings should be labeled as new or existing. Please make sure that they have that. An example of a summary of previous actions taken is in Exhibit A, and you must do a complete self-evaluation if you don't have a complete summary. Fair housing. No person should be subjected to discrimination because of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, or national origin. And here you go right now. Action does not have to be intentional to be a violation. If you're trying to help out a segment of your population that was discriminated against in the past, if you do something to help them out and it bars and it gives an unfair advantage to them opposed to other groups, then you've created a violation, even though you had the best of intentions. Next. You need to affirmatively affirm fair housing. In the past, you could just put up a flyer, a fair housing flyer, but that no longer satisfies compliance anymore. We have a list of additional fair housing activities in the Exhibits A section. Maintain documentation, and if there are any housing complaints, those complaints need to go directly to HUD or the Louisiana Department of Justice, and Exhibits A have the numbers and the places where you can send those complaints to. Make sure your citizens are aware of this. You also need to do a fair housing assessment. Your consultants will probably be the ones that compile this information, but we need you to work closely with them because you know your area best. Next slide. All right, for all these parts, basically what you need to know is part 1, part 2, and part 3 should be consistent. So if you've got a yes or a no in part 1, when you go to part 2, part 3, those answers that you put in there should be consistent with what you put in part 1. Okay, go to the next slide. Okay. The assessment should also be signed by both the preparer and the chief elected official. Okay. You also need to send us a fair housing assurance. This is in the Exhibits A section. In this assurance, you assure OCD that there have been no findings made by or open complaints with the HUD Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office or the Louisiana Attorney General. And also you will notify OCD at any time during the grant if a complaint is filed. You also need to encourage minority businesses and women-owned businesses. The best way to do that is to place them in your advertisement. You can also do a search on the SBA website to look for women-owned businesses and minority businesses. Go ahead, Heather. All right. You're also covered by Section 3. You're covered by Section 3 because all of our grants are over $200,000. So if you hire anybody to work on this grant, whether it's an employee to work on the grant or whether you're hiring a contractor, and we're talking about the construction contractor, the consultant, the engineer, if we're paying for it, you're covered by Section 3. So you need to keep that in mind. And contractors and subcontractors are also covered by Section 3 if their contract is greater than $100,000. Okay, Heather. Okay. You have goals to meet in order to satisfy Section 3. A lot of times you cannot satisfy these because you simply do not have Section 3 businesses in your area. What you need to do is go to the HUD Section 3 business registry. We used to let you use the minority business for Section 3, but now that the HUD Section 3 business registry is up and running, this is the website you should use. And when you do your search, include the whole parish where the work is being done. So say if it's a town, you still need to do a search by the entire parish. Next one, Heather. Make sure you do some good faith efforts to try to satisfy Section 3. Section A, we have some list of things you can do. If anybody wants to file a Section 3 complaint in the Exhibits A section of the handbook, there's a complaint form, and it should be submitted directly to HUD. Remember, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So if you do anything, make sure you document the file with the steps you took to try to satisfy Section 3. Equal employment opportunity, make sure you put up your posters in common areas for your employees to see. Include language in your advertisement for bids. Print on your letterhead that you're an equal opportunity employer. And also you must maintain employment data. We have an exhibit, it's in the Exhibits A section called the workforce analysis, or HUD has a form called EEO4. You can use that one as well. Next slide. That's it.
Thank you, Jimmy. Let's see, next is Janine Bro with acquisition. Janine, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
You're low.
Mm,
I think that's better.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're good now.
All right. So I believe there are only 3 grantees who have acquisition as part of their project this cycle. So I will try to speed through this relatively quickly, but please, if you do have acquisition as part of your grant, never hesitate to call me, email me, whatever. If you have any questions, just please let me know, because acquisition can be somewhat convoluted. I get that. Something that I want to emphasize is that you will need to send in an acquisition timeline. It's in the handbook. If you need help with it, again, just let me know. We need a timeline of roughly how long it's going to take you to complete all of the processes that are required to acquire the parcel of property. All right, so the Uniform Act. This is the federal guideline that you have to follow to acquire parcel of property with a federally assisted project. It's a blueprint. Can you skip to the next, please? All right. So in the context of an LCDBG project, what is property referred to? Specifically, most typically parcels of land, servitudes, also temporary easements. This is like construction on private property. It can be leases, specifically long-term, which in this context is 15+ years that are automatically renewable. Rights of way, which type of easement that allows access to another parcel of land. This also, and a lot of people don't realize this, even if you have acquired the parcel of property in the past and in anticipation of using it for an LCDBG project, then that's also included. Skip to the next one, please. And I can send you this checklist. This is basically the steps to acquire a property. You can skip to the next one. Okay. In the event that negotiations fail, and this is with voluntary acquisition, you can decide not to acquire. If that is the case, you must notify the person that you are going to acquire the property from within 10 days. And we also have a sample form for that is in the handbook. You can expropriate the property, which is exercising eminent domain. That's usually a lot more expensive than just acquiring the property though. So in most situations, it's not the best way to go. Okay, you can skip to the next one. In the event of donations, there are several steps that don't apply if you are going the donation route. You do still have to give the person that you're acquiring the donation from, it's a form. This is available on the HUD Exchange website. I can send you a link to the form if you need it. You have to give them, it's a form called When a Public Agency Acquires Your Property. And you also have to supply the owner. In the event of a donation, there's it's called property and or servitude acquisition waiver. And it's the owner saying they understand their right to an appraisal, and they're forfeiting that right. And just also keep in mind, like, document everything.
And especially in the case where you're dealing with the elderly or people who are illiterate, it's just document everything just to make sure that you can show that there's no question about whether this person was coerced into selling their property. So please be careful about that. Skip to the next one. There are 5 types of acquisition that are not subject to the Uniform Act. That's acquisition from another public agency. For example, if the town acquires, your town acquires a water well from a parish. Temporary construction servitudes and or easements specifically for the purpose of rehabilitation. Short-term leases that are less than 15 years and not automatically renewable. Voluntary acquisition, and streets. Skip to the next one. And specifically so voluntary acquisition, if I haven't mentioned so far, that is specifically a situation where there's no threat of the town and or parish, the municipality using eminent domain to acquire a property. And specifically the requirements are that there's no like set site or parcel that needs to be acquired. So you can have like 2 or more options of parcels. The local government won't exercise eminent domain, and this needs to be explicitly stated. We have a sample form also in the handbook that you can use for that. And the local government has to inform the owner of what it believes is the fair market value of the property. All right, we can skip to the next one. And so 3 types of documentation that we generally use to demonstrate ownership of property. Typically, I would say the one that we see the most often is an attorney's opinion. And it's also, it's probably just the most convenient to acquire. You can also show a copy of the title as recorded at the courthouse. And for streets, we accept proof of maintenance for at least 3 years under LRS 48491. Again, I realize this was like a very cursory overview and very fast, covering a lot of information. So if you have acquisition as part of your project and you have any questions, please let me know. That's it.
Thanks, Janine. I think next up is William Hall for procurement.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
All right. You're unmuted and ready to go.
Okay. The first requirement is that you must have a procurement policy that reflects both the federal and state requirements. Next slide. And one key difference that's occurred in the last 3 or 4 years, you cannot engage someone to help you devise your scope of work or bid who also goes on to make a bid on the same project. So if you need assistance in doing a bid, contact your office. Do not utilize a potential bidder. Next slide. Okay, 3 items that you need to have justification for in conducting procurement. The method of procurement that you used, the contract type, and the type of price that you're using in your purchase. Okay, next one. So method of procurement, there are 4 methods under federal law. Next. Micro purchases, small purchases, sealed bids, and competitive proposals. Sealed bids are governed by state law. Micro purchase, small purchase are local options with a federal ceiling, as is competitive proposals. The first three, micro purchases, small purchases, and sealed bids, are procurements that are principally based on the price of your purchase. Next one. Competitive proposals are utilized when you want a qualitative assessment along with price and cost for making a purchase. Next one. There are three types of federal contracts that you need to be aware of. Next. A fixed price contract, cost reimbursement contract, and time and materials. When you're purchasing equipment or doing a construction project or making a small purchase of an item, a fixed price contract is the appropriate type of contract. When there's some degree of uncertainty about what you're purchasing, typically for professional services, because you don't know all the costs involved, you use the cost reimbursement. Where in lieu of a fixed price, there's a cost ceiling that you can't exceed. And finally, time and materials type of contract is when the work is so uncertain that you can't fix the cost ceiling for doing the contract. Next. Okay, so there are four types of prices that you use in procurement. And your procurement can consist of all four sometimes. So lump sum price, when you're purchasing a single item whose specifications and quantity are known, that's typically for your construction project. A unit price, where you're purchasing multiple units of a lump sum item. Billable hours, when you pay for the work effort done, typically professional services. And reimbursable cost, when there are more than just personnel costs involved, when you pay someone to do material purchases as well as the personnel cost. Okay, next. So under our procurement procedures for the program, we require that professional services being done prior to the submittal of application, that once you've engaged someone at that point, you cannot terminate them. And if there are additional requirements, please contact your office for further details. Next. We do have a contractor clearance requirement. So if you have a professional service provider that hasn't worked in the program for more than 5 years, then they must submit a contractor clearance requirement from Exhibit A 35 in the handbook. Next. So in the documentation requirements, we need a copy of all your bids or requests for proposals, a copy of all the responses, description of the method of conducting evaluations when you do professional services, a copy of all the proposals and qualification bids received, the written evaluation and scoring of the proposal that you received, and define the basis of the cost reasonableness, as well as any clearance for new contractors. Next. So there, as I mentioned, there are thresholds, both state and federal law. A micro purchase threshold of $10,000 is a federal requirement. A small purchase for materials or supplies is set by state law at $30,000. Next. In the event that you have an advertisement for a competitive advertisement, either for a bid or proposal, and you only receive one response, that automatically defaults to a non-competitive proposal. And if that occurs, then you contact your office for further procedures. Next. So advertised sealed bids, the requirement under Louisiana state law, is that there be 3 advertisements over a period of at least 25 days. And the first day can't be a weekend or a holiday. And an additional requirement for that advertisement for parishes over 20,000 population and municipal governments over 10,000, they must also use an electronic bid system. There's commercially available ones, or sometimes the local governments on their own internet have a procedure for doing electronic bids. But if your population threshold is, if you meet that population threshold, you are going to have to do an electronic bid as well. Next. So here's an example of an advertisement by electronic bid from a commercial service. Next. So in the sealed bid file, you add a copy of the bid and plus all the addenda. The contract document guide will spell out those items. You need a copy of the bid opening and minutes and tabulation. The award has to be done within 45 days after the bid. And there's an additional 30-day extension that you have to request before, if you need to extend it beyond the 45 days. Next. So here's the calendar of days, including the extensions. So day 70, after your first advertisement, is your last day to make an award. And then you have an additional time for executing the contract after the award. An additional time limit for how many days to issue the notice to proceed after you've done your contract execution. Next. So if you have an addenda that's going to be issued during the advertisement period, you have to issue it at least 3 days before the bid opening date. Otherwise, you have to reschedule the bid opening date. Okay, next. So if a bid should go over the estimated cost, you have 4 options. Reject all the bids, start over again, reallocate the funds within the award, inject local funds to make up the difference, or award to the lowest bidder with a change order to bring the cost down. Next. So in doing a sealed bid, you award the contract, then you execute the contract, you hold a pre-construction conference, then issue the notice to proceed. And okay, done.
Thanks, William. If anybody has specific procurement questions, make sure to reach out and contact William about those. Next up is Jeff Tessier.
Okay.
All right, Jeff.
Good afternoon. I'm
unmuted.
Jeff Tessier. I'm the engineer for the Office of Community Development, Local Government Assistance. And I'm going to go about talking about, now everything I'm talking about is mainly for the engineers and the grant consultants, but it's very important for the mayors and the parish officials to understand what the engineers and the grant consultants are responsible for, because ultimately they work for you. You be signing a lot of papers, you be signing off on things, so it's very important that you understand what they're responsible for. Okay, a grant has 3 parts. Go ahead, just hit down. All right, first we start off with the application. Now, application was submitted last year. Given these times and everything going on, last year seems like a very long time ago. But right now, when the grant gets started, your grant consultant is going to work on your environmental, your ERR, and your engineer is going to work on your plans and specs. The scope of work in the application, the scope of work of what you applied for, must be the scope of work in the environmental and the scope of work and the plans and specs. Now that seems very simple, but many times it doesn't happen. Many times we get ERRs that are different than the plans and specs. Plans and specs are different from the application. This is very important at the beginning of the grant process to get this correct. So I suggest that the mayors, parish presidents, who's ever in charge, as soon as possible, have a conference call with your engineer and with your grant consultant and have the application in front of you and go through everything in the scope of work in the application to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, so you can hit it twice. One more, there we go. Okay, like I said, application was submitted a long time ago. Things have changed, the engineers looked at the project a little bit more, things have happened in the town or the parish. What if something changes? What if the engineer needs to move the water line from the north side of the road to the south side of the road? He needs to contact the grant consultant and he needs to contact the grantee, city or parish. If the grant consultant is looking at the environmental, looking at the site, something's different from what they originally thought, get in touch with the engineer, get in touch with the grantee. A lot of this is small. Y'all can work it out between yourselves, but communication is key. Now hit one more time, Heather. One more. There we go. If something major changes, if you're going from if you're going from let's say lake water for your source of water, but you need to drill a well now, or something big happens, contact us, especially contact me, because I want to make sure that the scope of work that you applied for is still going to be the scope of work that's going to be in the plans and specs. So if anything changes to a major degree, please contact me. Go down. Okay, just next two slides are basically the same thing. The grant is the three-legged stool. It's the application, it's the ERR, and the plans and specs. If one of them does not look like the other, if the scope of work changes, the whole thing's going to fall apart. We've seen this happen, unfortunately, too many times. Okay, next. Okay, this is what is expected from the engineer: to submit to me plans, specifications, the latest cost estimate. This is based on the latest estimates that you have in the plans. If you have a water or sewer project, they must be submitted to Department of Health for their approval, and I need to see any addendums, even if it's a wage rate change or if we're just delaying the bids. I need to see the addendums. Next. Okay, change orders, one more time. Click down, Heather. There we go. All this is very similar, hadn't changed. The engineer has to sign it, get the contractor to agree on it, sign it, send it to me. Once I approve it, okay, we're all dating these things. So the engineer and contractor date it, send it to me, I date it, and then the mayor or parish president will sign and date after me. So it's very important. We still deal with this a lot. It's the engineer, contractor, sign and date it, I sign and date it, and then the grantee signs and dates it. Okay, go ahead. Oh, and we do need a fully executed one with the mayor's signature on it. Okay. All right, a lot of things back in the old days had to be mailed in. We can now do a lot more with email. So change orders, addendums, anything time sensitive, please email it to me. And if it's very time sensitive, please give me a call and say, look, contractor's going out on site and he needs his change order taken care of. So anything like that, anything time sensitive, please send it to me. Plans and specs still must be sent in. Oh, go back one. Plans and specs still must be mailed in. A lot of people are going to online review of plans and specs. I'm not there yet. I'm not sure if I'll ever be, because I like to do a very thorough review. So please mail that in. I'm going to get to the RPR certification next, so I'd like that mailed in also. Next. For the engineers, this is the biggest change that's come about in a while. This is the new certification for the resident project representative, also known as the inspector. This is what we're doing now. You can take the next slide. It's going to explain a little bit better. Okay. Previously, I'll just sum this up. Previously, every grant had to have an approved inspector for that grant. You had to send in a qualification certification and a resume for each grant. We're not going to do that anymore. Once we approve your inspector, he is going to be approved from now on, so you don't have to do it for every grant. So normally an engineering staff has 3 or 4 inspectors on staff. Once they are approved, you don't have to get them approved for every grant. So we'll have a database, and all our LGRs in the office will have access to the database and can talk to me about it. So the monitoring team will check that database and make sure that the RPRs are qualified and approved and on the database. And so submit once and you never have to do it again. If you have any questions today, submit it at the bottom. And if you have any more questions next week, please feel free to email or call me.
Thank you, Jeff. Next up is Amanda again with environmental.
Okay, I will be giving you a brief overview of the environmental review process. So 24 CFR Part 58 is a federal regulation that addresses environmental responsibility laws and procedures. Each grantee must be in compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. This act established national policies and goals to prevent or eliminate damage to the environment. Next slide, please. All contract conditions must be cleared within 5 months, but the environmental review record should be received by the state within 4 months. Whenever ERR revisions are needed, it is important to sign and mail the revisions as soon as you can to avoid penalties for being late. Next slide, please. This regulation covers project aggregation. The purpose of project aggregation is to group related activities together so the responsible entity can analyze and address their impact, consider alternative courses of action, schedule the activities to resolve conflicts, and prescribe mitigation measures and safeguards to individual activities. Next slide, please. Okay. There are different levels of clearance for ERRs. An exempt project will have no negative impact on the environment. Examples of these activities include environmental studies, project planning, and administrative costs. A project can also be exempt due to imminent threats. Projects that fall under categorically excluded, not subject to, consist of activities like operating costs and equipment. Categorically excluded activities subject to include acquisition, repair, and improvements that do not change in size or capacity more than 20%. Most projects will require an environmental assessment. These activities involve new construction and substantial improvements. Rarely an environmental impact statement is needed. The project would have to have a significant impact on the environment to qualify. Next slide, please. After the ERR has been reviewed and no further revisions are necessary, the grantee is given permission to publish the required notice for their project. After the local comment period has ended, the grantee will send a request for release of funds form. When the ERR reviewer receives the request for release of funds, the state's 15-day comment period begins. The ERR is cleared when this comment period ends. Neither a grantee nor any participant may commit LCDBG funds or private funds until the state has approved the grantee's request for release of funds. This regulation is triggered when the grantee submits an application to the state. Therefore, the restriction does not apply to the commitment of non-federal funds prior to grant application submittal. Next slide, please. If the ERR has to be revised due to project scope or site changes, then compliance areas will have to be reconsidered and all relevant agencies must be made aware of the changes. And if you have any questions, you can contact me, Phoenicia, or Jimmy about environmentals.
Thank you, Amanda. Next up is Corey Williams with Labor.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, go ahead. So for labor standards, most of the actual work and analysis is going to be done by your labor compliance officer, which is most likely going to be your consulting firm. But it is important for you as the grantee to understand some of these things because ultimately the responsibility does fall on you. These are the 5 main regulations that govern labor. Davis-Bacon, you may have heard before. Basically, that means that everybody that's working on the project has to be paid prevailing wages. The Copeland Act, which we'll get to in a second, requires the weekly submission of payrolls with statements of compliance and also covers deductions. QASA, which is the Contract Work Hours and Safety Standards Act, the main thing with that is it requires overtime be paid at time and a half. Then obviously Louisiana law and CDBG requirements. Go ahead, Heather. So the Davis-Bacon Act, the most important thing here is that there's Davis-Bacon Act and Davis-Bacon related acts. The Davis-Bacon related acts is what governs your project, and it covers all federally funded contracts over $2,000, which is all of the projects that we do. And like I said, that requires that prevailing wages be paid to the workers on the project. Go ahead, Heather. So this is an example of what a wage decision would look like. So to pull out like a backhoe excavator operator, if there's one on this project, he has to be paid at least $13.01 per hour, or else there's going to be restitution involved and potential other violations. So that just gives you an example of what it's about. Go ahead, Heather. The Copeland Anti-Kickback Act, like I said, this is what requires weekly payrolls and statements of compliance to be submitted. And another important thing here is that any deductions that are taken out of the wages for the employees, that's not a normal deduction such as taxes, they have to be authorized by that employee to be taken out prior to being taken out. And I'll show you what that form looks like later, but go ahead, Heather. QASA is what requires time and a half be paid for any hours worked in excess of 40 hours during the work week on this project. It does carry a liquidated damages penalty, which is a penalty from HUD at $27 per person per day. It's gone up several times over the last 5 or 6 years. And it's a pain of a process. So that's why one of the reasons that payroll review is such an important thing. And it's important to have your pre-construction conference to make sure that the prime contractor and any subs on the project understand what's involved so that we try to avoid these issues. Go ahead, Heather. These are some examples of the different exhibits that are in Section B, which is labor. I'll just point out one, for example, whenever you as the grantee move forward with your contract award, where you award the actual contract to the prime contractor, you'll see the third one down is notice of contract award. That's a form that is submitted to us so that we can keep and record everything on our end. And that's just an example of some of the different exhibits that are in the labor section. Go ahead, Heather. A verification, before you can award the contract, we have to verify that the contractor is not on the debarred list and that they have an active DUNS number. I'm sure most of you as grantees are familiar with DUNS numbers because you have to have active ones as well. And any entity receiving federal dollars on any of our projects they're required to have an active DUNS number. So that's something that we check up front before you even award the contract. And we check it for all primes and all subs, as well as the consultant and engineer when we go to monitor the project to ensure that all of them are active. Go ahead. This is an example of the form that is submitted to us that we use to verify the contractors before you award it. Go ahead, Heather. These are the chronological steps, the general steps for labor. I'm not going to get through all of them. Your labor compliance officer should be familiar with them. Hang on right here, Heather. I want to point out number 12, the examination of payrolls. Like I said, there's required that there are weekly payrolls that are submitted and reviewed. And your labor compliance officer is going to be on top of that, but you as the grantee also need to make sure that that they are on top of that, because we've had issues in the past where, for example, we've had a finding or several findings with some of the subcontractors, and once the subcontractors are finished with their work and off the site and they've been paid, they're sometimes very hard to get in touch with, and it's very hard to get them to acquiesce to our findings and submit what they need, the documentation they need to clear those findings. So, and ultimately that may fall back on you as a grantee, and it could potentially result in disallowed costs. So it's very important that that your labor compliance officer stays on top of these things. Go ahead, Heather. These, I'm not going to spend too much time on. These are just different steps. You can kind of flip through them every few seconds, Heather, of where the wage determination and wage decisions are found. It's a new website that started about a year ago. And this just kind of takes you through the steps to find the proper wage decision for your project. And again, these slides and everything will be posted. Stop here, Heather. Everything will be posted online. So if it feels like I'm going fast and you can't keep up, you can go back and look at those. So I fixed these circles and these arrows, but apparently they didn't stay there. This is a notice of contract award. As I mentioned earlier, it's a form that gets sent to us, and it's something that shows us the different money that's involved. What I wanted to point out to you as the grantee on this form is under the source, let's see, number 3, under the source, purpose, and amount columns, if the bids come in over the grant amount allowed for construction, we need other sources of funding here. So that may require you to be willing to put up additional funds, local funds, into the project to make sure that the low bid is met. Go ahead, Heather. This is an example of the payroll form. It's the HUD WH 347 form. This is what your labor compliance officer is going to be reviewing for accuracy and compliance. Go ahead, Heather. This is the back page of it, which is called the statement of compliance. And again, ignore these circles. They showed up correctly earlier, but this is the back page where whoever's authorized to sign these payrolls signs off that everything is true and correct on the payrolls. Go ahead, Heather. If there's any additional classifications needed, this is the form that would be submitted to us. But again, you don't have to worry about that. Go ahead. You can skip through these as well every few seconds, Heather. If there's any necessity to locate archived wage decisions, these are the steps that you would go on in the beta.sam.gov site to find those archived sites. Previously, I wasn't sure how to do that, and I finally recently figured out how, so I added those to the slides. This is the payroll deduction form. If you heard me mention earlier, outside of normal taxes, any deductions that come out of the employee's wages or the worker's wages, they have to sign off on this form, allowing the contractor to take those amounts out. Go ahead. So one thing we want to avoid, and if you happen to see any payrolls and you notice that there's nothing but laborers on the payrolls, that may be an issue. Laborers are I guess for lack of a better word, the cheapest work on the wage decisions. And so we have to make sure that contractors aren't loading their projects down with laborers and having them do work that's outside of the labor classification. So that's why this slide is important. Go ahead, Heather. And finally, the final wage compliance report is a document found in the closeout documents, and it's submitted with the closeout documents. And it's something that I, as our CDBG labor compliance officer, have to approve before you can close the project out. And it includes any and all restitution on the project. But before I can approve it, any labor findings have to be cleared. So as I mentioned earlier, if there's a subcontractor that has left the site and we can't get those findings cleared, then I can't approve this final wage compliance report and you can't close the grant out. So that's why it's important that you stay on top of labor as well as your labor compliance officer to make sure that everybody is in compliance. And if there's any questions that any of you guys have, you can call me at the same number that everybody's been giving you, the 225-342-7412, or shoot me an email, corey.williams@la.gov. And again, that's Corey with no E. So thank you.
Thanks, Corey. I'm going to finish up the last section, which is monitoring, closeout, and program amendments. The first thing I want to talk about is our new process. When your grant reaches 25% drawn, we will be conducting a desktop review. And this is really just a way for us to provide some technical assistance and reduce the number of findings that we've been seeing over and over. And so we'll send out a letter when your grant is 25% drawn, and we'll request some documents and certifications and have you fill out a form. And you'll have 30 days to send those documents back to us. And the review checklists are also in section E if you want to look at them. This is a new procedure for us that we're working on. And the next step would be to monitor the grant when it's 50% drawn. I hope you can hear me. I keep getting notifications that my internet is unstable. So when it's 50% drawn, and we usually kind of start around 40, we'll send out a notice that we're ready to monitor, and that is done on site. Right now we've altered that, but hopefully we'll get back to normal where we all go out and do it on site. Those exhibits are also in the handbook. We will send you a monitoring report and tell you if there were any findings or concerns, and you'll have to respond to any findings of deficiency that we find. When your grant is around 80% drawn, or we think you're getting close, we'll send out a request for a closeout. The main thing is to remember to always use the most recent closeout documents. Even if you have a 2020, but you're closing it out in 22, you're going to use the closeout documents for 22. So we'll get one program completion report. In order to close out, receive a conditional closeout, your project has to be in full operation. We'll need a clear lien along with the program completion report and 3 copies of the certificate of completion with original signatures. And all your findings of deficiency also have to be cleared, which includes if we issue you a finding for being on the non-compliance list for you not turning in your audit. So that's very important to make sure you stay off of that too. In order to get a final closeout, all of our funds have to have been audited. And any other conditions that we issue for conditional closeout. Another thing is the program amendment. If you have changes that are going to be greater than 10% of your original budget, or if you're going to add or delete an activity, you'll need to do a program amendment, and that must come from the grantee. That shouldn't be coming from the consultant. You can use, if you have extra funds remaining, they could be used if you don't have to amend your environmental, and you have to make sure that you have our permission first. Changes to approved projects, we will allow a change if it is required in order to complete the project. We don't like to because if you have to amend your environmental, it takes too long. So we would only do it if it's required. You do need to request it in writing. And that's just if it's a small change that doesn't necessarily create or cause a program amendment, those are changes. And again, it's just to make sure that you're communicating with us and not doing anything without our permission. Let's see. I think that's the same. And again, any change that is not needed and wouldn't be covered under the original ERR will not be considered. And I believe Tracy is going to wrap things up for us. Tracy, unmute.
Thanks, Heather. I just wanted to say a few things just to wrap things up here. Things that I want you as the grantees to pay attention to. And first, I would also like to echo what Rusty said to begin with. Congratulations on getting these grants. It is a competitive process. But I think we funded some really good projects this year that we could see some great results out of. Thanks for joining us today. I know it's not always easy to find time in your schedule to do it, but it's very important for you as the grantee to understand your responsibilities. That you hire an administrative consulting firm or an engineer to assist you with these projects, but you need to understand that you are the grantee and you're the one that is responsible for these funds. There are some compliance areas that, if there are issues, could result in disallowed costs. And so that's why we want to go over this information with you and make sure you understand that. There's also benchmarks that have to be met, like we discussed in the beginning about clearing your contract conditions, that could affect your funding amount, because you could get penalties if you don't meet your benchmarks. And also your performance on your projects is going to affect future funding. So it's important for you to note that as you work on your projects. I have encouraged our staff to include you as the grantee on any communication with the engineering consultant so that you're aware of what we're communicating to them. I encourage you to read the letters and read the emails and stay active and up to date on your projects. If you read something or you get a notice that you don't understand, or it seems different, or something you didn't understand or think, then give us a call and let's talk about it so that we make sure we're all on the same page. And that's all I had to say. I would just like, again, to thank you all for joining us. And we appreciate everything you do out there. So y'all stay safe and healthy, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.